Have you ever felt like the images you watch on a screen aren't just passive, that they're somehow watching you back, recording every flicker in your eyes? This is the story of a cursed reel of film, one you'll wish you never knew about. I'm Violet Nocturne, and tonight, I invite you into another chapter of Echoes of the Dark. Watch closely, but beware. Some things once seen can never be unseen. Our tale begins in the dusty, forgotten backroom of an old movie theater on the outskirts of a sleepy town. The protagonist here is Gregory Reed, a film projectionist, and a man with an obsession for the obscure. Gregory lived for film. Not the type showcased under golden spotlights during glittering award shows. No, he craved the forbidden, the bizarre cinematic relics cast aside or banned for their disturbing content. In the labyrinth of flickering shadows in his projection room far from curious eyes, Gregory was king. One ill-fated evening, an unmarked package arrived at the theater. Brown paper wrapped around something cylindrical, sealed with yellowed tape. No sender, no return address, just Gregory's name scrawled in shaky black ink. He peeled away the sticky tape with the glee of a child opening a gift on Christmas Day. Inside, a single reel of film. Its canister was rusted, the label missing. Gregory squinted at the film strip against the dim light. Its frames looked chaotic, as if spliced together from different sources. Disjointed figures, unfamiliar symbols neither ancient nor modern, and landscapes that seemed warped, otherworldly. Intrigued, Gregory decided to screen it that same night, well after midnight, when the theater was empty of patrons. The projector roared to life, threading the reel into its mechanical entrails. The first images splashed across the screen. A field bathed in eerie green light, stretched endlessly toward a horizon that seemed to flicker. Sounds began, low whispers, indistinct and layered, seemingly coming not from the speakers, but the air all around him. The figures in the film moved unnaturally, jolted movements, as if every muscle were rebelling against its own will. But it wasn't their movements that unsettled Gregory the most. No, it was their faces, their eyes. They locked onto him. His pulse quickened as he convinced himself it was just a trick of perspective. But the longer he watched, the more he was sure of one terrifying truth. These figures, they were aware of him. It felt as though they saw through the screen and into his soul. At first, Gregory laughed nervously, an awkward chuckle meant to dispel the growing dread. Yet in the pit of his stomach, he knew this film was not like the others. It bore a sentience, malevolent and ancient. As the reel spun wildly onward, the things on screen began to resemble people. Not unfamiliar people, but faces that Gregory recognized. The bartender from the pub 2 streets down, his landlord, his childhood piano teacher. One by one, they glared at him from the screen, their mouths moving soundlessly while their eyes pled for escape. He halted the projector. No sound, no image, just silence, and the hum of his own ragged breaths. Gathering his wits, Gregory unwound the reel, intending to stash it away forever. Yet, when he looked down at the film strip in his hands, he froze. Embedded in the frames now was his own face. It was unmistakable. His scruffy beard, his wiry glasses, and the mustard stain he had spilled on his shirt earlier that day. The Gregory on the film wasn't standing still. He was mimicking Gregory's own actions in real time. As the shimmering light flickered in the darkened room, his filmed doppelganger blinked its glassy, orange-tinged eyes and smiled an unholy smile. Gregory lunged to destroy the reel, yanking it from the projector and attempting to tear it apart with his bare hands. The celluloid wouldn't break. It writhed in his hands like a living thing, slithering from his clutches. The reel freed itself, clattering onto the floor, and rewound without any assistance. A stench filled the room, sulfur and burning ozone. Then Gregory heard it. His own voice, though he hadn't spoken. It was trembling, distant, yet all too clear. "You invited me. Now you'll take my place." The projector reanimated. On its own accord, the reel began to spin once more. The Gregory on screen raised a trembling hand and pointed directly at the real Gregory, his lips curling into a sinister grin. Desperation surged. Gregory grabbed a pair of scissors from the workbench, lunging for the damned film. But as he moved, his arms suddenly stopped midair. Panic welled in him as he realized he couldn't move. He was paralyzed, frozen in place, as though the unseen hand of the film itself had snared him. "Please," his voice croaked, hoarse and breaking, as though hoping whatever entity governed this cursed reel was listening. Without warning, the screen's image distorted, flexing and bending in unnatural waves. Suddenly, Gregory felt a pull, not physically, but deep within, as if his very essence was being drawn into the flickering light before him. He screamed, his body convulsing. The dim room exploded with vivid colors as his voice was drowned out by an ear-piercing static. And then, total darkness. The theater was found abandoned a week later. Gregory was never seen again. The only thing left in the projection room was the reel, perfectly rewound and pristine in its decayed canister. Employees assumed his departure was voluntary, something about a nervous breakdown, but rumors soon swirled when a new projectionist took the job. It wasn't long before this second projectionist also disappeared. This time, the police found a chilling clue. The reel had been loaded into the projector, and on its film strip were resplendent images of Gregory, perfectly lifelike as he screamed voiceless in an indistinct void. Each new projectionist who dared to play the film suffered the same fate. And so, the cursed reel remains locked away, gathering dust, biding its time until another curious soul unwittingly unleashes its horrors. You see, the reel isn't content with simply existing. It requires an audience, a viewer, a victim. Every person who watches becomes part of its eternal, ghastly collection. So I ask you, what would you do if a mysterious reel of film arrived at your doorstep? Would you dare to screen it? If so, be warned. Make sure your reflection in the screen doesn't move when you do. Until next time, dear seekers of the macabre, sleep lightly, and remember, some stories are better left untold.